This is the Kia Sorento, and it's a brilliant car. When it was unveiled towards the tail end of last year, you can actually go and pick one of these up with a self-charging hybrid system, but now it's available in a full-fat plug-in hybrid system, or PHEV, and that means you can drive it for up to 35 miles in complete silence. The only downside though is it costs upwards of £45,000 for a Kia. Well, today we're going to find out whether it's worth it. But before I get into the review, remember to hit the thumbs up and subscribe for more awesome videos just like this one. Now, before I jump into the way this thing looks, it's actually built on the same production platform as the Hyundai Santa Fe. What's quite interesting though is that this was classed as an all-new model and the Santa Fe was a facelift, though new model is much more accurate because again, the underpinnings were completely new. But let me know which one you prefer the look of, the Santa Fe or the new Sorento. I personally prefer the Sorento because I think it looks a little bit more subtle compared to the Santa Fe, but it still has a really nice premium look to it with a bit of aggression. We've got LED headlights as standard, but you can get bifunctional LEDs further up the range. You also get 19-inch wheels across the range as well, but they all come in slightly different designs. Paintwork, meanwhile, all options are £660, unless you want brown, which is free. Same story at the back of the car. It looks pretty much identical to the normal Sorento. Got a little wing at the back to make it look sporty, which is funny because it's a massive 7-seat SUV. These exhausts are completely fake. But the thing I love the most about the rear of the Sorento are these tail lights, because, I don't know about you, but to me, those look like they've been plucked straight from a Ford Mustang. Of course, they don't have that third bit there, but still, very American. Now, when you open the bonnet, there's quite a lot of free space in here, and you kind of think that Kia's just done a really bad job of packaging, but it's actually because this car is available with a V6 in other markets. But here, we don't get that, probably due to emission rules. Anyway, the PHEV is powered by a 1.6 litre 4-cylinder petrol engine, and combined with an electric motor produces 261 brake horsepower, which isn't bad at all. Now, that is sent to all four wheels through a 6-speed automatic gearbox. Quite rare that you see 6 speeds today, but anyway. Now, being a PHEV, it does mean that you can drive this car on electric energy alone. So we've got a 13.8 kilowatt hour battery at the back of the car, and that gives us up to 35 miles of electric range. Now, realistically, you're probably going to get closer to 30, but that's still pretty damn decent. So how does that compare to the Hyundai Santa Fe, which this shares so much in common with? Well, the Hyundai ekes out 1 more mile of electric energy, which is going to be very noticeable on the road. I drove the standard version of the Sorento when it came out towards the end of last year. So if you want an in-depth review of the interior and the rear seats, go click the link up in the top right-hand corner because I cover it all in my review. Now, the PHEV version is pretty much exactly the same. So instead what I'll do is go through the trim levels. Now, trim levels chop and change all the time, so what I say now might not necessarily apply in 2 or 3 years' time, but the general rule of thumb for Kias is the mid-spec car is the one to go for, and with the Sorento, it's no exception. We're in the entry-level car here, and it's actually missing some key features. So the entry-level car comes with this 8-inch touchscreen with Kia's old infotainment software. Now, it's not bad, but the 10.25-inch system that is available on the rest of the range has the latest software, which is not only better looking, but has more features. We also don't have wireless charging in here, which comes on the rest of the range, and you have to physically turn a key to start the car, which feels really strange in a PHEV. But all models come with a reversing camera, adaptive cruise control, and wireless Apple CarPlay, though I found that it was often disconnecting for absolutely no reason on this entry-level car. So entry-level cars are a bit of a mixed bag when it comes to features. And if you go for the very top spec, you do get such luxuries as a head-up display and a panoramic roof as well. But as I said earlier, it's the mid-range car that you want to go for. There's acres of room in the back for both leg and headroom, and you can recline really far back as well. Really convenient USB ports on the inside of the seats, and one of the best armrests in the back of the car I've ever seen, with really big cup holders. Boot space is a little bit smaller at 604 litres, whereas the non-hybrid car is 616 litres. So not a huge difference, but remarkably, it's actually quite a bit bigger than what you get on the Hyundai Santa Fe. Bearing in mind that they share the same underpinnings, the Hyundai Santa Fe only has 571 litres of storage. So another point for the Sorento. When you get into the third row, the best thing to do is actually slide the middle row forward a little bit, which isn't too bad because we actually have so much space back here that you're not really compromising on legroom. And then when you want to jump into the third row, all you have to do is press a button on top of the seat here, which automatically folds the seat forwards, and you dive in. And when you're back here, it's actually quite spacious, particularly if you've moved the second row forward just a little bit. Sure, it's not going to be the most luxurious place to be, but beggars can't be choosers, really. It's not like you've got a minivan, and it really is pretty nice back here. We actually have some climate vents with climate controls on this side, but not on that side, and also a USB port. But dare I say, I think I prefer it back here than I did in the Hyundai Santa Fe. I was really impressed when I drove the Sorento towards the end of last year, because not only did it feel a lot more premium than before, but it actually felt like Kia could finally take it to its German rivals. And now that the PHEV has turned up, it's pretty much got every base covered. So what's the PHEV like? Well, it's actually one of the most different feeling cars in the range, because we can, if we want to, just run it on electric power alone. And if you do that, you're going to be getting around kind of 28 to 30 odd miles. So not the full claimed 35, but not far off. And it's a big step on from something like the self-charging hybrid, because that is essentially just a fancy word for a regular hybrid, meaning you don't get nearly as much range. You're only going to be doing, let's say, a few hundred meters on electric power alone, whereas in this, we have control. We're in the command seat of where we want to be electric and where we don't. So as you'd imagine, it's pretty much silent when you have it in electric mode, and the petrol engine starts up pretty smoothly whenever you make that crossover. It's also pretty smart at figuring out when it wants to be an electric car and when it wants to be a piston car, although you do have some control over how the car reacts. So at the moment, I've got it in eco mode, which, as the name suggests, is the most fuel friendly. But I do also find that to be the most dim-witted mode as well. So sometimes the car can get a little bit confused when you put your foot down and want to come away from, let's say, a set of traffic lights. It doesn't always know what it's doing. But that's a lot better when you whack it in to sport mode. Yes, that's right. The Sorento has a sport mode, which seems a little bit odd, but what it does is it just sharpens up the throttle and brake response and just makes the car feel a little bit faster. Now, sometimes I find these to be a little bit useless in these kind of cars because there's nothing remotely sporty about them, but it really does turn the car into something that's just a little bit more responsive. So if you are going for an overtake and you're gearing up for it, whack it into sport mode, and it'll be much easier to make the overtake than if you had it in eco. The only thing that lets it down is the gearbox, which definitely feels a little bit dim-witted. Because it's a 6-speed, I often find that it feels like it's always gunning for more revs. So when you do put your foot down to go and overtake something, it really makes quite a racket. Ride is pretty damn comfortable. If you're in a slightly more rural area like I am at the moment, it can feel a little bit fidgety here and there. But overall, it's pretty comfortable, and particularly at the moment of where I'm driving around at 30 miles an hour and the electric motor's kicked in. Yes, the ride may jiggle a little bit, but it more than makes up for it with that silent running from the electric motor. Now, you can monitor your hybrid power usage through a 12.3-inch virtual cockpit. And this is one of the best in the business, I think. It looks really great. And I like Kia kind of adds these kind of like purple highlights to it, which just gives it a unique look. It's really distinctly Kia in a good way. And speaking of tech, we've got adaptive cruise control in here as standard. That's included in the very base car, which I think is really impressive because you'll find a lot of these cars, more expensive rivals, will charge extra for adaptive cruise control, but here we've got it as standard. You'll probably want to know my MPG as well. Well, I've averaged around about 45 since setting off this morning, and that's been about 60% motorway and the rest has been kind of like country roads. So it's really not bad, although when you do run out of battery, it can tank a little bit. You can then start looking at the low 30s. So the best thing to do is just keep the battery topped up. And this is the point usually where I'd compare it to its rivals, but the Sorento PHEV doesn't really have many rivals. The only other car that isn't a Hyundai Santa Fe, which again, these two are very similar, is the Volvo XC90 plug-in hybrid. But that's a considerably more expensive car. So yes, it's nicer, but you're also paying about 10, 20 grand more for the equivalent car. So it's pretty much between this and the Hyundai Santa Fe. And they are very, very, very similar cars. I'd say the Hyundai feels a little bit more luxurious, a bit fancier, but I probably prefer the layout of the Kia Sorento. But I think the Sorento just edges it. Although I wish they didn't include this touchscreen and put some better infotainment tech in. That really is rubbish. Just like the standard car, the Sorento PHEV is a superb 7-seater family SUV, particularly if you go for it in mid-spec form. Now, it is expensive. Prices start at £45,000 and go all the way up to 54 grand, and that's a lot of money. But there aren't actually a lot of PHEV cars with 7 seats in this kind of price range. And thanks to its PHEV-ness, it should make a pretty good company car. Of course, if that all sounds a little bit too much, go head over to yesauto.com because we've got plenty of new and used deals on Kia Sorentos.